John Micah and Stephanie Murphy, and
Murphy.
that's looking close, but right now the edge is with Stephanie Murphy. We'll be watching that one all night, though.
Yeah, so, okay, everybody's got to stay tuned. These are extremely early numbers, but, so we've got a ways to go.
Yeah.
And right now I want to introduce Jessica Gillespie. She is another really crucial part of our team here tonight, part of our live coverage. Jessica is our social media reporter, and Jessica is going to be monitoring a whole bunch of social channels tonight, Twitter, Facebook, and more. So please use the comment section. You can send in as many questions as you like, and we will try to get to as many of them as we can in real time. So fire away on questions. And Jessica will also be taking a look at what's going on. So are you seeing anything this early, Jessica?
So we just posted in the comments. We've got some questions if there's up-to-date information on the amendments. So that's in our election results page on our website. So I just commented that. It's pinned at the top of the comments underneath our Facebook Live. So if you're watching on Facebook, it's there. And we're also tweeting it and sharing it elsewhere. And if you're watching on our website right now, it's on our homepage. So you can check that there. We're updating it. It's real time. Other than that, I'm not seeing too much.
I can jump in on one thing.
Great.
It's once again very early, but when I look at the sort of the baselines, solar amendment, if that's what they're asking about, does not look to be getting 60% so far. Medical marijuana had a 72% here in Orange County, but that's once again a very blue place. So the short answer is we don't know, but medical marijuana looks to be doing a lot better than the solar. I call it the fake solar amendment. Yeah.
Okay. Great. Other than that, I'm monitoring our staff list right now on Twitter. We've got Jeff Weiner and you, Scott, too, are tweeting a lot. So we're keeping an eye on results. And as soon as I see somebody jumping out and taking something, I'll wave at you.
Just holler at us, because we want to give people the information as soon as we can get it. Now, I want to go now. We've got Kayla O'Brien, one of our reporters, live. She's at the Hilton in Altamont Springs. This is where the Seminole County Republicans are holding their victory watch party. Kayla, are you with us?
Yes, I am. Can you hear me? We're here at the Hilton in Altamont Springs. And if you can imagine 500 days ago, this is the night that everyone was looking forward to. And it just got busy a little bit ago here. As you can see towards the corner, if you can pan the camera over there, people have been filing in the last few minutes or so. When the first polling stations closed at 7 o'clock, everyone was crowded around the TVs trying to see who was ahead. And obviously, as you know, not much is known at this point, especially with the presidential candidates, but everyone here is pretty excited. There's a lot of buzz. No one is really fatigued at this point quite yet, so everyone is really just excited and giving each other hugs. So here we are again. I just want to give you a good view about the wideness of this room here. As you can see, the stage is right there, so all the winners of local races will go up there. John Micah should be here in the next few minutes or so to give a speech, whether he wins or loses. And we want to come over here real quick to talk to Jesse Phillips. He is a recently elected official, and he's kind of working on the results here. He's got a little percentage marker up here. So how has it been this election cycle? Very unique in comparison to other years.
It's definitely been unique. There's been an incredible amount of energy. I mean, we're looking at like 82 to 85% turnout among GOP voters in Seminole County, which I think would be some sort of record. So it's incredible. We're seeing some good numbers coming in for Bob Cortez, who we're watching, and a number of other state candidates. So feeling really good tonight.
Do you think a lot of Republican voters are going out for the local races, or do you think Donald Trump was really the one that brought everyone out?
I think it's a little bit of both. I think there's a lot of new people that are voting for the first time or that are not frequent voters. But I'm telling you, with some of the numbers we're seeing on these local candidates, it was clear that they also kind of drove the turnout. You talk about like the trickle-down effect from the top of the ballot to the bottom. When you have an effective state party, you can actually see kind of a trickle-up effect where people will turn out for those local candidates, and that in turn helps the guys up at the top like Rubio and Trump as well. So I think we're seeing a little bit of both, but amazing turnouts. It's really exciting.
What about tonight's event? Do you think there's going to be a lot of excitement even if there's some losses?
Yeah, I mean, we kind of expect to win some and lose some. You like to win everything. I actually haven't looked at the top of the ballot numbers. Looks like actually Trump is a little bit close. Actually, yeah, Trump's actually hardly winning Seminole. We expected him to do better than that. But so there's some good numbers and bad numbers. But I think on the whole, with the turnout that we've seen, it's going to be a good night for us.
Sounds like.
Oh, we have.
Yeah, Kayla, so I'm having a little trouble with the audio on your guest there, but it looks like the room is filling up. There's going to be a lot of excitement over the next few hours, and some of those early returns are coming in.
Definitely, and the room is crowded. Like I said, there's people over here at the buffet grabbing food and different things. We have a bar in the back, so it's really a party atmosphere. We have tables of people kind of watching the TVs, watching the different PowerPoint presentations of the scores as they come in, as the polling places put in their information. So we actually have one more guest, if you have time for us, Beth. We have Jeremy Bauer here, who's the Seminole County leader of the Republican Party. So how's it been going tonight? What's kind of the sentiment around here?
Well, I think people, still so far the initial returns were looking pretty well. In Seminole County, it's always about not whether Republicans win, it's how much we win by. What I tell people, if Hillary Clinton loses or wins by 2 points in Seminole County, she's going to win the state. If same thing with the senatorial race. If Marco Rubio wins by 12 points in Seminole County, that's a good sign.
How was voter turnout in Seminole? Was it higher than you expected, about on par?
82%.
Wow.
So yeah, pretty high.
That's pretty high. Do you think everyone's in good spirits right now around here? Yeah, Beth's pretty high.
And we haven't started drinking yet. So
some of the early numbers are
you.
showing Hillary Clinton actually leading in Seminole County. And I think if I heard him right there, he's saying if she wins even by a couple points in Seminole, then she wins the state of Florida. Do I have that right? Okay.
Yeah, that's exactly what he said. And Seminole County is such a big deal in the state of Florida. And as we've been hearing all this election, Florida might be the reason one candidate wins over the other. So definitely very, very important. So Seminole County, part of that I-4 corridor we've been talking about for months and months and months. So I'm going to take you around here a little bit more. Here's the buffet. Unfortunately, we have not partaked in this yet, but we have lots of people here with Trump gear. We got the hats that have been famous through this election. Everyone's really excited about supporting their candidate and watching him potentially take the presidency in the next few hours or so. So let's go over here to the TV.
Like
so this is where all the action is.
Trump hat there, so that's gotta be a hot item.
Oh yeah, exactly.
And so it does look.
It's a very hot item.
Republicans are getting ready for the party.
Yeah, and they're watching all the results here on Fox News over here. We're going to talk to some of them, some of the voters that are just here to support their candidate. They're not elected officials, but they just want to be a part of the experience. I'm going to bring them over here. Hello again. So we're here. Now you're watching the results. Anything crazy happen so far?
Trump's doing well, and I think we're going to have some nice surprises at 8 o'clock. And my opinion is if Pennsylvania goes to Trump, he'll run the table.
Kayla, I'm having a little trouble
Landslide.
with the audio.
And there was a real interesting exit poll that Fox ran. 82% of the respondents in the exit polls said they voted for change. That's a little hint.
All right. Well, good luck tonight. I hope you get the results you're looking for. Thank you. All right, Beth, so I hope you can hear me better. We'll have to fix the audio before we go to the Democratic Party later on in downtown Orlando. But here, the atmosphere is very positive. Everyone's very excited. It's starting to get busier. And we're going to keep watching those TVs and see how this election pans out.
Thank you so much. We're going to keep checking in with you throughout the night. Kayla will be at the Republican Victory Party in Seminole County for a little while longer, and then later on she'll join us from the Democratic Party in Orange County in downtown Orlando. And so, all right, we're gonna move this discussion along a little bit. I want to introduce another really special guest here with us tonight. We have Aubrey Jewett, a political scientist from the University of Central Florida. And Aubrey, big night tonight. I know
Absolutely.
you've been watching this for a long time.
Too long.
Too long.
I think I speak for all Americans and all Central Floridians. It's been going on a lot. The English have it right. They call an election and like 8 weeks later, it's done.
And I have heard that the election cycle here goes on so long.
If you want to look back to the first debate for the Republicans, you remember when there were like 75 of them on the
Yes,
stage?
all on the stage.
Was in August of 2015. So
More than a year ago.
And they had to be announced long before they got into the debate. So it doesn't just seem like it's gone on for an eternity. It has.
And anything you picked up on today that you thought was particularly interesting?
Well, I think, as Scott was saying, it's potentially going to be a real good night for Democrats. It is still a little early to tell. But, potentially there are some signs. If a Democrat, as you guys were talking about earlier, runs well in Seminole County, where I also live and have lived for 20 years, that usually is a good sign. President Obama, his first time running for office, he didn't win Seminole, but he came darn close. And, of course, he won the state by 3 points.
And they have so I'm clear, I'll go right back to you, but they've updated the numbers and they have flipped slightly. Trump now has a lead, but it's exactly what you said. It looks like running neck and neck, which is something generally a Democrat would be pleased with in Seminole County. But
yeah, absolutely. But overall, the poll, I always tell my students, the pre-election polls are usually right, and they showed Florida as very close. There was 3 or 4 polls that came out over the last week that showed Hillary up by 1 or 2. One showed it tied. One showed Trump up by 4, which I thought was probably a little off. But, overall, Florida's going to be pretty tight. I guess the other thing go ahead.
How important is Florida overall for the presidential contest? If Hillary takes Florida, is there a path for Donald Trump?
Well, based on recent elections, the last 3 or 4 president elections, no.
Okay.
He would argue, and his supporters would argue, his diehard supporters would say, well, maybe because we're going to try to be competitive in some states that Republicans have not been competitive in a while, like Pennsylvania, which is sometimes listed as a battleground state or a swing state. I mean, it's not really a swing state. It hasn't voted for a Republican, I think, since Ronald Reagan, so it's been a long time. But realistically, if Hillary can win Florida, it probably means it'll be an earlier night for everyone involved and that she's going to be the next president of the United States.
And to give you some more perspective on how strong she is running in Orange County, and this also tells you how blue Orange County has become, which it wasn't this blue not that long ago.
No.
But right now, with decent, we're talking 450,000 votes already tallied in Orange County, so it's a sizable number. The Clinton lead over Trump right now is 60% to 35%.
Yeah.
That's like when you're running against a toadstool. I mean, that's those aren't you wouldn't normally call that a viable candidate. So these are big numbers right now, still early, lots to happen, but those are pretty strong numbers.
And I think it's important to point out there for our viewers too, is that those are not just Republicans and Democrats. I think the most voters in Orange County are actually voters without a party affiliation or not one of the main.
Yeah, there are more of those than there are Republicans. I think unaffiliated that are now the second. But
yes, they're second. So
but they're giant, and they'll probably pass Dems.
Okay.
Yeah.
So now let's move along from presidential for just a minute because we have so much happening just right here in Central Florida tonight. Scott brought up the Micah Murphy race earlier.
Yes.
That is one to watch for sure, especially considering what we're seeing early.
Absolutely. I mean, not only is it important to people in Seminole and East Orange who are actually in the district, but it's one of those races that Democrats are hoping to knock off a Republican incumbent, and if they have any chance of taking control of the U.S. House, it's a slim chance because Republicans are so far ahead, but if they have any chance, that's the kind of race they have to win. A number of rating organizations actually had 3 congressional races in Florida as toss-ups, and if Democrats had the best night possible in terms of congressional races, they would actually, for the first time in like 20-some years, be ahead in the Florida Congressional delegation 14-13 if they can pick up all the competitive seats. There's one in South Florida, District 26, with 2 Cuban candidates, a rematch of 2 years ago. Carlos Curbelo is the incumbent. And then in District 18, which was Patrick Murphy's old seat, that's an open seat, was currently held by a Democrat. But if Democrats can keep that one, that will keep them on track. And then last but not least, over in the Tampa area, We've got Charlie Crist coming back.
Because you couldn't have an election in Florida
Without-
without having Charlie Crist running for
Right,
something.
absolutely, yeah. Governor, senator, governor, education commissioner,
Insurance
et cetera.
commissioner, I
and
believe.
he's covered all the
Attorney
bases.
General.
He hasn't
Yeah.
run under the Whig label, but he has been a Republican, a Democrat, and an independent.
That's right.
Even
that's
while
right.
holding a single office, I think he was practically all of those.
Yeah, a governor.
While he was governor, yes.
Absolutely.
Indeed. So,
But to
yeah.
put the you were just talking about the Micah race right now. It is still looking strong for Stephanie Murphy. He is ahead right now by 8,000 votes in Seminole County, which is red, but she is ahead by 20,000 votes in
the
Orange
Orange
County,
County part, yeah.
and so that's a big number. And Micah is a big name. I would argue he's the only sort of household name from Congress around here, and he's got his fingerprints on everything. I usually say if it's big, involved concrete, and a whole lot of taxpayer dollars, John Micah probably had his fingerprints on it. Sunrail, the airport, Interstate 4, all of these things he's had a big hands in, and I think people knew it, but this has been an election that has been where people have been calling for change and really looking to get rid of sort of what I think is the dysfunction in Washington.
Absolutely. And it's just a different district. You know,
Oh, yes. You should have mentioned that, yes.
Yeah, absolutely. Because, you know, the Florida Supreme Court back in December, after a long 2-3 year court battle, decided that the congressional districts in Florida and the Florida Senate districts all had to be redrawn. And so all the 27 congressional seats were redrawn, and,
Right.
and Micah's now, the one that he's in, actually has about a 4,000 or 5,000 vote
Right.
lead for Democrats by registration. So it's really not, you know, the district that he usually has been running in. And I think the other thing was he just was caught a little by surprise because Stephanie Murphy, the Democrats actually had a hard time getting somebody in that race, but they finally got somebody in the summer. And then they promised her that they would spend millions, and they have. I mean, she's gotten, from what I've read, $6 million plus, either to her campaign or from outside groups, and she's actually outspent Micah 2 or 3 to 1. Very unusual. Incumbents almost always spend more than challengers, and this is going to be one of those rare cases where they don't, and probably it's going to pay off for the Democrats. We'll see.
Yeah, and I think you're right that he was caught off guard. I can give you one anecdote that I moderated a forum over the summer, and we asked every candidate in the room for their stance on some basic gun issues, something I know, Beth, you have written about a lot.
Sure.
And John Micah was the only candidate at that debate who would not give an answer. And I have to tell you, John Micah knows where he stands. Everybody in the room knew where he stands,
Absolutely.
and it was pretty solidly with the NRA. But he did not want to say it, and that was the first time where I realized, oh, you know, you're in trouble. Now he could still pull it out, but right now the poll results would suggest why he thought he was in trouble.
Right. And it is. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, you know, I think Micah is one of those races where he is so well known here in Central Florida that could split some ballots. I think there are both Democrats and Republicans in Orange, Seminole, Osceola that, or not Osceola in case of Micah, but in Orange and Seminole who might not be willing to vote for Donald Trump, but would vote for
You're
John
exactly
Micah.
right, Beth, and that's what the numbers are showing. As I mentioned, well, Trump right now in Orange County is getting 35%, but Micah's getting something like 40-something. And this also makes the case that Democrats who were spending $4 million, they tried to make him like Siamese twins with Donald Trump. And John Micah wore his endorsement of Donald Trump like an anvil around his neck, while some candidates ran screaming from him and said, "I'm not the Trump guy anymore." Micah sort of gave a heavy sigh and would say, "Yeah, I'm still with him." And then Stephanie Murphy said, "Well, bring it on, because I'm going to put it on an ad." And
Right.
Right, and she certainly did that.
Yes, she
if
did.
you watch any television at all, you've
Yeah.
likely seen that. Well, thank you, Scott.
yeah, absolutely.
So Aubrey, what do we know about Stephanie Murphy? She's a new candidate. She hasn't held public office before, I don't believe. Is that right?
No, she's not. She is a very fresh face into politics. She's a Vietnamese refugee, in fact, and came to the U.S. And then she said that after 9/11, she decided she wanted to do something patriotic for her country, so she got involved in anti-terrorism activities up in Washington, D.C. And she's currently an instructor over at Rollins College. She's married, has a couple of kids. And she's really, I think, also played not only attacking Micah, but she's played the fresh face and the woman card as
Yes.
well, because a lot of her attacks about Micah were tying him to Donald Trump and, you know, a number of the comments that Trump has made about women.
Yes.
And
And Micah has come back strong on that. I know that he has sent out a number of mailers and other pieces where he has focused on women who support him. He has
absolutely.
He seems to sense a vulnerability in that area.
Absolutely. Yeah, I got one of the mailers that he sent out and had about a picture of 20 different
Yeah, I
fairly
saw
high
that.
profile
Yes.
women who all in
All
some different
elected
parties
women
even.
all over
yeah.
the county.
And yeah, he they do support him. But and a change, and potentially this is a change election, and again with the district itself, and it's not like nationwide or even statewide. When these districts are drawn, they typically favor one candidate or another, or one party or another, and and this one now favors Democrats, at least by a small margin, and that under normal circumstances that might not be enough to knock off an incumbent, but if anything, this presidential election has made this a very unusual election for sure.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, all right, well, that's a race we're going to have to watch throughout the night. Still, certainly too early to make any definitive statement about it one way or the other. I want to bring in now Paul Owens. Paul is the editorial page editor here at the Orlando Sentinel. Paul, you've got one of the toughest jobs every 4 years because you have to lead the team that decides these Sentinels' endorsements. That's the institutional voice on our editorial page.
That's right. That's right. And I think that's an important function. Newspapers have been doing it for decades. Certainly the Sentinel has been doing it for decades. But it can make for some awkward moments at dinner parties.
I imagine it can. Now, this year, it's no secret now, it's been out for weeks. The Sentinel editorial board endorsed Hillary Clinton at the top of the ballot. What type of reaction did you get to that this year?
Well, we got some criticism in my area of the newspaper. You tend to hear from the critics more than from the fans. But I don't think the criticism approached the criticism that we heard 4 years ago when we endorsed Mitt Romney. And we also heard quite a bit in 2008 when we endorsed Barack Obama. In 2004, we endorsed John Kerry, and at that point, it was the first time that the Sentinel had endorsed a Democrat for president since Lyndon Johnson in 1964. Lyndon Johnson was running against Barry Goldwater, and Barry Goldwater did not get a lot of newspaper endorsements in 1964. So the Sentinel kind of departed from its tradition at that point, but it was not quite as surprising as it might have been in 2004.
When after that long stretch of endorsing Republicans for president,
correct,
the Sentinel did endorse a Democrat and then has gone back and forth since then.
Right.
Now, you made some endorsements in some other really key races. You endorsed John Micah in the race we were just discussing.
Yes, and Scott Maxwell mentioned his fingerprints, as Scott put it, on every major transportation project in Central Florida. That includes, the expansion that's underway of Orlando International Airport, the upgrade of Interstate 4. Sunrail certainly wouldn't be here if Micah hadn't been able to secure the federal funding for that. And one point I do want to make about those is it is actually possible to be fiscally responsible and an advocate for those projects. And here's why. Those projects are paid for with gas tax money or user fee money. So those are actually paid from pots of money that are specifically dedicated for transportation projects. They're not general revenues, so they're not literally added to the U.S. deficit the way a lot of other things that you pay for with federal money.
So that's how Micah has maintained a very conservative voice, and also he has been the biggest champion for Sunrail and for some of these other huge infrastructure projects here in Central Florida.
Sure. And those projects not only create a lot of jobs during the construction phase, but they also make the economy healthier around here and improve the quality of life as well. So we felt like it. Stephanie Murphy is a very articulate, impressive candidate, but we felt like that particular endorsement was a pretty easy call for us.
All right, well, thanks, Paul. Stick with us. I want to turn now to Jeff Weiner. Jeff is our Orlando City Hall reporter. Jeff, what have you been watching and what can you tell us?
Well, I'm watching some of our congressional races. One that was over quickly as we expected it to be was Val Demings has won Florida's 10th congressional district, former Orlando police chief. She was in a very hard-fought primary in the Democratic primary, had some well-funded opponents. But cruised through that, has cruised tonight against an opponent in Twee Lo who, well thought of in her community, was not nearly as funded or supported by the Republican Party as Val was by the Democratic Party. That's also a very Democrat-leaning district, so no surprise there. The bigger surprise, though, would be Stephanie Murphy continues to lead John Micah in somewhat of a surprise. She's hanging tough in Seminole. He leads by a few points there, but has a wide lead in Orange County.
Okay.
This is a district that's changed a lot. John Micah held his district for a long time, but this is a different district. The old version used to have parts of Volusia County that were very conservative. The new version has parts of Orange County, including parts of downtown Orlando, that are much more left-leaning, and it appears that has really brought some new voters into Micah's district who are voting for Stephanie Murphy, it appears.
Yeah.
So that would be a big surprise locally, but it seems to be trending that way.
Interesting. And so definitely, it looks like definitively at this point, a new member of Congress from Central Florida in Val Demings.
Yes, that's right.
Who a lot of people know as the Orlando police chief, and happens to be married to another person on the ballot tonight, Orange County Sheriff Jerry Demings, who is vying for another term.
Right, and it looks like he's won another term. Some outlets are already starting to call the race for Jerry Demings. He's holding a lead over his opponent, and it appears that he's won another term. So it's a very happy evening in the Demings household.
I guess
suppose.
so.
Yeah.
A lot of celebrating in the Demings household.
Yes. Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you, Jeff. Really appreciate it. And so I want to turn now to Charles Minshew. Hi, Charles.
Hi, Beth. How are you?
Doing well. We're already getting so many numbers.
We are.
And I want to let everybody know Charles is our data reporter here at the Orlando Sentinel. He's been crunching turnout numbers and other numbers all day long.
Yeah.
And even before, because I know you've been on top of early voting. Mm-hmm. So what can you tell us?
Well, the state just started reporting statewide turnout numbers.
Okay.
Since the polls closed on the Panhandle just about 3 minutes ago, we're already at 62% turnout statewide.
Okay.
When I crunched some numbers earlier today, we already had about 8.5 million people who have voted. So that number's going to probably jump up to the mid-70s by the end of the night.
And how does that compare with what we saw in 2012?
We had about 75% voter turnout in 2012. It was high 70s.
Okay.
Orange County, for example, this year just fell at 72% voter turnout, and it was only at 68% in 2012. So Orange County is tracking ahead of where we did in 2012. The state as a whole is probably going to kind of end up where it did last time, though.
Okay, so might not surpass that number,
it's going to be
but
very
maybe come close.
On a percentage basis, it's going to be very close. But I mean, it's going to be very close to 9 or 10 million votes by the end of the night, which is it just shatters any other previous raw number, I think.
What can you tell us about party breakdown? A lot of people want to look at
Yeah.
party breakdown.
I'm actually going to pull this back up because I've got too many
And
spreadsheets.
while you're doing that, I want to go, we'll give you some time to look at your numbers. Jessica, let's go to you for just a second. What are you hearing?
The Associated Press says that Hillary has won Delaware and D.C.
Okay.
And Trump has won Oklahoma. So that's the latest from the Associated Press in terms of states, not us.
Okay, so the District of Columbia and 2 additional states called.
Yes.
For Oklahoma for Donald Trump, and
Delaware.
and the District of Columbia for Hillary Clinton.
And others are rolling in, so I'm keeping my eye on the Associated Press's Twitter feed right now just to see what they're saying.
Anything specific to Florida in the Twitterverse right now? Not in terms of results, of course, that's going to be a little early for that, but I imagine the Micah Murphy race is getting quite a bit of chatter along with some others.
It is. I did actually put out a call on our Twitter page at Orlando Sentinel asking if anybody had any questions for you.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure if this involves, some speculation on your part, but Bobby wanted to know if you think there's any chance something other than grandstanding and investigations gets done in the next 4 years.
If Hillary Clinton is elected president. It's a good question, and I think that is something for people to keep in mind. And I'd like, Aubrey, you can chime in on this too, but I know Chaffetz just said the other day he plans to reinvestigate the emails yet again.
Yeah, if Republicans keep control of the House, which most people who are prognosticating think that they will, it's possible if the Democrats have a big night they won't, but if Republicans keep control of the House, then I suspect they'll probably continue with the same strategy that they've had with President Obama, which is they will fight him tooth and nail. And with Hillary, I think it's going to take it a step further because it's going to be more personal.
Yeah.
And they'll do more investigations on the email situation, probably on the Clinton Foundation, pay to play, these kinds of things. So I suspect that there won't be a whole lot that gets done in Washington, D.C. if that happens, and particularly if the Senate stays Republican. But even if the Senate goes Democratic by one senator, or if it's 50-50 and Democrats control it through the vice presidential tiebreaker, still we probably are not going to get much done. It would be nice to think that we would. And occasionally, maybe on a few big issues, they might come together, but we probably won't, I'm afraid to say, to our viewer listeners.
Because, Congress's approval ratings are just always in the tank, and yet so many of these folks are re-elected to do more of the same. And maybe we'll have some surprises here tonight, but it just seems historically that is the case.
Well, historically, yes, but until such time as Republicans in Congress are shown that their strategy is not working, and by not working, I mean they get tossed out of the majority.
Yeah.
They will continue to do it because from their perspective, and from the perspective of a lot of diehard conservatives and Republicans, they're basically trying to stop the Democrats and stop Hillary Clinton, for instance, from dragging the country in the wrong direction. And so that's what they're probably going to do. Again, until the voters send them a clear signal that this is the wrong thing to do, and that only happens if they lose the majority. And then we see, as we saw, for instance, in the first 2 years of Obama, going back seems like so long ago now, 7-8 years ago, where, with a Democratic House and a Democratic Senate, whether you agree with what they got done or not, they actually got a great deal done.
So, all right, so Bobby, to whoever asked that question, not a lot of hope for much beyond grandstanding. So I want to get back to,
Jessica's a really big race call right now.
Yeah, Jessica, what you got?
The Associated Press reports that Marco Rubio has been reelected to U.S. Senate in Florida.
Wow.
Wow.
Okay. So very early call for the U.S. Senate race. That is a big one. Now, I don't think that is too surprising based on what the polls were telling us. If I remember correctly, Marco Rubio had been up over Patrick Murphy by roughly 6 points or so.
Yeah.
Is that about right? So that's not terribly surprising.
Yeah, this is one of those cases, where the pre-election polls are accurate, and as they usually are. If you go back really 3 months, Patrick Murphy has not been ahead in any poll. He's been tied in a couple, but Rubio's been up in like 50 or 60 polls, not always by a lot, but he's been up in every single one, and it's been consistent. And of course, I think the big difference is, as you and Scott had touched on earlier, is the Hispanic vote.
Absolutely.
Because for Donald Trump, he's just not going to do well with Hispanic voters in Florida or anywhere else, and that's why it's very tight, and why Hillary, has a decent shot of winning Florida, but why Rubio is now he's been called the winner, so that's why Rubio was able to win. I think when we see exit polls, it'll show that his support among Hispanic voters was very much higher, and not just Cuban Hispanics, but also some Central Florida Hispanics who like him as well.
And that's going to be interesting when we really get to dive into those numbers. I was talking earlier today to Maria Padilla, who actually is the owner and author of the Orlando Latino blog, and Cuban Americans in South Florida, I think Rubio's campaign felt pretty confident there. Those voters tend to lean Republican. Here in Central Florida, where we have many voters who are Puerto Rican, they tend to lean Democratic, although more and more are registered without a party affiliation. And there was one rally here in Central Florida where Marco Rubio showed up and was actually booed a little bit here at a local crowd. And so that was kind of interesting. And Maria and I were kind of talking about, well, how will that work in Central Florida? So it'll be interesting to see those numbers.
It will, and I'm not saying that he's going to win the Hispanic vote in Central Florida, the non-Cuban vote, and in fact, he'll probably win the Cuban vote, but even that is not a sure thing for Republicans anymore, because what we've seen, historically it was. You could take it to the bank, but it was starting about maybe 8 years ago, 4 years ago, what you've seen is the younger generation, the millennials, say 35 and under, they don't have the same anti-communist, anti-Castro feeling as their parents and grandparents. I mean, for their parents and grandparents, primarily they were voting Republican because the Republican Party from Reagan on was staunchly anti-communist. And so that was their party. But for those younger Cubans, they actually are pretty much like younger voters everywhere else, Cuban or non-Cuban. They're more progressive, they're more liberal, they're worried about civil rights and civil liberties and economic justice and these kinds of things. And so they've been voting Democratic.
And that is how Marco Rubio comes out a winner tonight. For viewers who just joined us, we just announced that Marco Rubio has won the U.S. Senate race over Patrick Murphy here in the state of Florida. And as I was saying, that generational split amongst Cuban Americans, particularly in South Florida, is how Marco Rubio can come out a winner, but Donald Trump might not. We'll have to see for later on this evening. Now, Charles, I want to turn back to you. I know you're looking at the numbers. You're looking at turnout, lots of stuff. Tell us what you've got.
Right now, turnout across Florida is at 64%, and that's only with about half the precincts reporting. So a lot of counties have turned in their early voting ballots, their vote-by-mail ballots, but they haven't started counting the actual votes of people that voted today. And when I last checked, Election Day voting got to over 2 million votes cast, and that was before you even add in Palm Beach County and all the votes from Miami-Dade, where they were on track for a record-breaking turnout, or at least a record-breaking number of votes. And they were trending toward 900,000 to 1 million votes in Miami. In Central Florida, turnout was pretty solid across each county. In Orange, we had 71% voter turnout. Osceola, 72%. Brevard, 77% turnout. Volusia, 73%.
Wow.
We don't have numbers for Seminole right now, but earlier today, Micah tweeted that turnout was up in the high 70s. I don't have the number for that.
So Seminole could be the highest of all of those if that holds.
Exactly, and Seminole County is really close right now in the presidential election.
What are you seeing right now in terms of the latest
Seminole
number?
County, Donald Trump has 102,000. Hillary Clinton has 100,500. It's very, very close, as is Stephanie Murphy and John Micah in Seminole County. John Micah only leads by about 5 percentage points in Seminole County. Whereas in Orange County, Murphy leads by quite a bit right now. So he has a lot of ground to make up in Seminole County with that strong Republican base.
And all right, we should have more races coming in shortly.
It should be. Seems like it's going to be soon. I keep checking some projections.
It's the refresh. Anybody who has done election night before knows you just keep hitting refresh, refresh.
I'm watching an anxiety-inducing kind of back and forth for Florida on the New York Times has an upshot that's going, it's 0.3 for Trump in 1 second, 0.3 for Clinton another second.
Is that right?
Yeah, right now they're projecting 48.6 to 48.5% for Trump.
See, now, I don't like that. I don't like anything within the legal
recount margin.
Mandatory recount margin. So we're going to have to keep an eye on that. All right, we've got Renee Stutzman here. Renee, you've been keeping an eye on the judicial races for us. What can you tell us?
Well, I can tell you that if you live in Orange County, you will have 4 new judges. Two of them, I think, 2 of the races I think are too close to call right now. But the biggest race, the judgeship with the most authority, that pays the most money. It's a contest tonight between two newcomers. They are Luis Calderon, who works for the law firm run by Jose Baez. Baez represented Casey Anthony and won an acquittal there. He is facing off against Joseph Haynes Davis, and Mr. Calderon of the Baez firm is winning that race with about 60% of the vote.
Okay.
So it looks like he will be getting that job.
Okay.
If you shift, that's a job that covers the jurisdiction of Orange County and Osceola County. So setting that aside, moving to another jurisdiction.
Yeah.
Seminole and Brevard County. They're teamed up in the 18th Judicial Circuit. There's a circuit judge race there as well. Currently, Cristina Sanchez, a 39-year-old woman, she speaks Spanish. She is leading over a former assistant public defender, Steve Henderson. She is pulling in about 56% of the vote.
So pretty high margin there.
That looks to me like that's a victory call for Cristina Sanchez.
Okay. All right. So 4 new judges for people who live in Orange County.
I can see by the smile on your face you're so very excited about that.
I am. Yes. You know, I got to tell you, I think these judicial races mystify people. They don't know who to pick. The judges' races are hard because the candidates feel so limited in what they can say and what they can talk about. We did try to provide some info in our voter guide, which I hope everybody took advantage of. But yeah, so these are tough, but this is so important because if you get in trouble, these are the people that you're going to deal with.
Well, let me tell you a little bit about the trouble you might get into and how these races are going to have an impact. If you are arrested for drunk driving, you will go to county court.
Yes.
Orange County is choosing 3 new county court judges today. If you don't pay your credit card bills and the credit card company sues you, you'll go in front of a county court judge. There are a couple of races that are too close to call in those county court judge races. One is Eric DuBose versus Michael Gibson. I think that's too close to call right now.
Okay.
There's another race between David Johnson, he's a Maitland lawyer, running against Tom Young. He's a former missionary and an appellate lawyer. That race is really, really tight. Both of them are in the 49 and 50% vote total range right now, so I'm going to wait on that one.
Okay.
But there is a county race. It looks to me like Evelyn Jewett has defeated Frank George. She's polling 57, 56%. She's the wife of an Orange County judge, Steve Jewett, and she has had a long career at the public defender's office. But the DUI, you ain't paying your credit card.
That's right.
Those are county judges, and so Orange County gets 3 of those tonight.
Absolutely. All right. Well, thank you so much, Renee. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Beth.
And we'll keep an eye on those that you're still watching too, and check back with you in a little bit. Charles,
Yes.
let's turn back to you and Jessica. Jessica, you got anything for us?
We've been asked a few times more about the medical marijuana amendment, so I was going to give you an update on that. I just refreshed our results page.
Oh, good.
Right now, we're up 74% yes on
Okay.
Amendment 2, so that's really high.
And that never got passed. It only got 57% the last time
That's
this was
right.
on the ballot.
Because if just a reminder to everybody, these amendments must get at least 60% in order to pass. And the medical marijuana amendment, the last time around, fell just short of that. This amendment is similar. It does have a few differences, but it's fairly similar. And I think the support this time around is just far more broad. We've seen the legislature already introduce a form of medical marijuana and through something called Charlotte's Web. It's the non-euphoric kind, the kind that doesn't get you high. And I think attitudes have changed on that. So I wouldn't be surprised to see that amendment pass tonight. But there's still a lot of precincts coming in. Is that
About half the precincts.
It's about half, yeah.
It's about half. Okay,
But
so
a
that's
little
a pretty
over,
good number.
little more than half.
But you also have to remember, I'm looking at the numbers right here from 2014, and you have, let me see
He's
here.
crunching some
I'm
numbers
crunching
here.
We
This
all
is
call him our numbers
real
cruncher here.
time
I mean,
data journalism.
in 2014, you had a total of 5.8 million votes cast in that amendment race. It was a midterm election. We had the gubernatorial race, but the turnout was so much lower than this time. You've got higher Democratic turnout this year. You've got more people that normally probably wouldn't come to the polls on an off year.
Absolutely.
And we've got 3 million more votes almost now for overall. So
In terms of the raw numbers.
in terms of raw numbers,
Yeah.
so medical marijuana is going to has a much better chance of
And
passing
these
this
numbers
year.
are rolling in quickly. I just refreshed again, and it jumped from 3.1 or 3,100, sorry, of precincts reporting to 37 now, 3,700. But do you want to, Charles, also mention the solar amendment here? Because
Yeah, the
right
solar
now,
amendment right now is having trouble. It's 51% yes, 49% no. It's got to have 60
To
pass. And I'm looking at the AP right now, 3,400 of 6,000 precincts reporting. It's got a long way to go to get to 60%.
And that one has been interesting, and Aubrey, if you want to chime in here too, you know, unlike the medical marijuana amendment, which I think had some much broader support this time around, Amendment 1 on solar was really hard fought between the folks who wanted it, and which were mostly the big utility companies here in the state of Florida, and the people who did not want that amendment because they think it will actually tamp down the solar market and prevent solar from flourishing here.
Yeah, and it's interesting to see the numbers, you know, a small majority voting for it, but it doesn't seem like it's close to the 60%. So at this point, I'd say the utility companies have spent $20+ million of their dollars, which actually were our dollars originally.
That's right.
To try to push this through. And it's, you know, quite frankly, I look at it as a win for the little guys because they really spent so much money to get it on the ballot. In fact, as everyone probably remembers, the solar energy environmental crowd originally were the ones that were going to try to do a petition to get their own amendment on.
That's right, and that's how this one started.
Absolutely, and so then the utility said, no, we've got to try to undercut them. And
This is actually a counter amendment to an amendment that failed to make the ballot.
It is, and in fact the environmental crowd was upset because the utility companies came in and paid, basically hired all the regular people that would go out and get signatures, and then the poor environmental people, they couldn't afford to hire anybody else. And so in some ways this is just dessert. You know, the Florida Supreme Court looked at this and they did allow the amendment to go forward, the solar amendment to go forward on a 4-3 vote. But I will say that the 3 people that voted against allowing it on the ballot were scathing in their criticism.
Yes.
Basically
Justice
saying...
Cariente in particular
Absolutely.
called it, you know, just a complete, well, gosh, now I'm not going to remember her exact words.
Paraphrasing, it's a scam.
She
Right,
said
watch
it's
it
a
out.
scam.
Yeah, watch out.
This is nothing more than the status quo, as I believe what
Absolutely.
she said. Now, I want to recap for viewers. We have announced that Marco Rubio will return to the U.S. Senate. That's one of the biggest results that has come in early tonight. Rubio bested Patrick Murphy by, I believe, a good margin. Do we know the margin on that race?
The margin on Rubio, we're looking at 51.8 for Rubio, 44.5 for Patrick Murphy.
Okay, so
he got over half the electorate.
Exactly. So a big night for Marco Rubio, and this is something that I don't know if people could have imagined 6 months ago during that awful Republican presidential primary when Marco just flamed out.
He did. You know, he really wanted to be president, at least that's what he said, not a U.S. senator. He was not going to run for this Senate seat again. I think he really meant it, quite frankly. He seemed to be all in.
Until he lost.
Well, and even then I think he meant it, because when he originally was dropping out, people asked him, he said, no, I said I'm not going to run. But it is one of these cases where basically the entire Republican establishment in Washington, D.C. and in Florida basically begged him over and over again to get back in the race once he dropped out of the presidential race, because they said, look, control of the U.S. Senate is at stake, and none of these 5 or 6 other Republicans that are vying to replace you have been able to break out. And so we're really worried that Patrick Murphy, or Alan Grayson back in the day, might win this thing, and you're our best hope. It sort of reminded me of Star Wars, you know, help me Obi-Wan Kenobi, you're our only hope.
You're our only hope.
So it was kind of like, Marco Rubio, you're our only hope. And so, gosh, when all these people keep telling you you're indispensable, it takes a strong man to say, or woman, to say, no, I won't gonna run. So he got back in that race,
and
that
he
he
did
won.
have
So
an Orlando connection for our viewers here. If you remember, I believe it was the shooting at Pulse nightclub over the summer that Rubio said at the time pushed him over the edge to get back into the Senate race.
Yep, he did say that. And I'll say there's actually been another long time Rubio connection here to Central Florida, and that is, even though he is from Miami, when he got elected 6 years ago, he decided to set up his statewide office here in Orlando.
Yeah.
And so his statewide office is about 5 blocks from where we're at right now.
That's right.
And so he's here. He's been here quite a bit. And let me add this on Rubio. Looking ahead a little bit, I hope that he can be the senator over the next few years that he's been over the last 5 months.
Yeah.
Because he really, he's been more engaged with the state. Obviously, when you're running for president, you're out of the state a lot. You miss so many votes, and that
Yes.
became an issue. But if I had any advice for him, and maybe I'll pen him a letter,
Yeah.
Senator Rubio, if you can just, no matter what your presidential aspirations may be in 4 years, if for the next at least 2 or 3 years, just be the senator you've been for the last few months. Get around the state, talk to people,
Be engaged.
be engaged, and get back and forth to Washington. Listen to people, make those votes up in Washington. Don't miss any, and just really be the best senator that you can be. And I would argue not only will that be best for Floridians, but that will really be best for him in the Senate, and really best for his aspirations to be president, because nothing would be better than to basically do the best job you can do, and then if you're going to turn your attention somewhere else, then say, okay, now I'm turning my attention. But
Yeah.
I'm hopeful that he will.
needs to fall back in love with the job a little bit.
Yes,
after
absolutely.
disparaging it somewhat during the
Absolutely,
presidential
yeah. He got
primary.
discouraged. And I mean, I can understand, as we were talking about earlier, up in Washington, D.C., there's plenty of gridlock.
Yes.
A lot of times not much going on. His signature issue when he first got elected was going to be comprehensive immigration reform, and he was
Sure.
actually successful in getting the Senate to pass
and,
it.
Yeah.
It's
And
just
then
that, of
he
course, the
walked
House.
away from that.
Well, and then the House, Republicans, quite frankly, from what I've read and what I remember, I think the House would have passed it, but the Speaker of the House at the time, John Boehner, said, I'm not going to bring it up because although some Republicans would vote for it and almost all Democrats would vote for it, it would probably pass. I'm not going to bring it up because the majority of Republicans don't want it in the House. And so he didn't ever bring it up. It gave Rubio, I think, a little bit of a black eye in terms of trying to get something done. And as you said,
Sure.
then he sort of backed off of it and sort of waffled a bit about what he was trying to do. And he's kind of angered the Republican base because they thought, hey, it's amnesty.
That's right.
And then on the other hand, a lot of Hispanics who really liked him and supported him then felt betrayed because
Exactly.
they felt
That
abandoned.
he turned
and
away
I
from them.
suspect when you mentioned earlier that when he did an event here in Central Florida, there was actually some booze.
Yeah.
That's part of it, because there's a lot of Hispanics across the country, but in Florida, who are still upset with him. And now I heard him defend his position pretty ably at a debate with Patrick Murphy at UCF. And he explained exactly what he had tried to do, and he said, "I still have a plan. I haven't given up on it. If you re-elect me back to the U.S. Senate, I'm going to work on it again. And here's what we've got to do: border security first, and then we can work on other things." Because he says there's just not enough votes in the House to do it any other way. So he hasn't given up on it, but.
And he's now won definitively another term.
Absolutely.
This
So
is
he'll
an
have a chance to
opportunity
do it.
for him to shore up
Absolutely.
that those voters again, and again show voters that he does want to travel the state. He wants to be here in the state for them, and also in Washington for them, which
Absolutely.
was something he wasn't doing when he was busy running for
And
president.
if he could actually get through some sort of comprehensive immigration reform, it really would be
And
a
depending
feather.
on who wins president tonight.
Well,
and
it's certainly
also
the chance. Yeah.
you know.
Yeah, well, obviously, if Donald Trump
Yeah.
wins, then there's not going to be
Right.
comprehensive immigration reform such as it was envisioned earlier.
Correct.
If Hillary wins, and if there's a lot of ifs, and if the Democrats take control of the Senate, I mean, it passed before, even with Republicans in control. So.
Yeah.
It still will come down to the House, but if he could get it through, it really would, be a signature piece of legislation for him, and really never to really start talking about the next presidential election.
Oh,
But
no,
it
don't
could
even
launch
start.
him. It really could be the kind of thing that launches him, because his stock would go up immensely
Sure.
in the Hispanic community, and as we're seeing in this election, that may be a decisive vote, not only now, but in the next few elections.
So speaking of all those ifs, I want to turn back to this side of the table because I want to see if we have any other results. Jessica?
Caitlin Dornbos is here, and she has a result that we're
Oh,
calling.
Caitlin, yes, please.
Well, we're going to go ahead and call the Orange County Sheriff's race today. 6 precincts haven't voted, but all but 6.
Okay.
We're going to go ahead and call it for Sheriff Demings.
Okay,
the
so
incumbent.
Sheriff Demings wins another term.
He has won another term. He's been in office for 8 years. He'll go ahead and go on and continue to be our sheriff. He's winning right now by about a 2-to-1 margin against Spike Hopkins.
So pretty hefty
who's
lead there.
running. Yeah, so we're going ahead and feeling safe with calling that election.
All right, so as we said earlier, pretty good news in the Demings household tonight because Val Demings also won her congressional seat.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm actually going to their election night success victory party pretty soon to see updates with the sheriff and also his wife. It's going to be quite a party with both husband and wife in the house.
I imagine so.
Celebrating, yes.
Absolutely. So, all right, well, thank you so much, Caitlin, and maybe we can check back in with you a little bit later and get some read on the energy in that at the party.
Sure.
Are they going to be with the rest of the Democrats?
They have their own separate party.
They're having a separate party. Okay.
Yeah, they're at the Orchid Room.
Okay.
Downtown. So.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you so much. So, Aubrey, another win in the Demings household.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, as you said, there's a big victory party there.
Yeah.
Probably not a huge surprise. I think the Sheriff Demings.
I don't think so. Demings seems very popular.
He is. He's been popular. He's a Democrat. Orange County is Democratic. But more to the point, I think that he's done, and most people in Orange County feel like he's done a pretty good job as sheriff. Obviously, there's been a few, issues, as there are in every major urban county when it comes to police enforcement. But overall, he's been rewarded for doing a good job, and that's the way it's supposed to work with these constitutional officers. Quite frankly, is if they do a good job, then reelect him and let him serve again.
I heard Sheriff Demings speak recently at an event. The sort of overarching theme was gun policy and gun control, and there were some people who survived the Pulse shooting there, and there were some parents of some of the young people who died in Pulse there. And Sheriff Demings, I think, added a voice for the everyday violence we see in Orange County. Particularly gun violence. He said he had recently asked his staff to determine the number of children killed by gun violence. People under 18 and in many cases much younger than that. And the numbers were pretty startling. And I know he's got this task force going. Their work is not complete yet on gun violence. So I think that's going to, possibly continue to be an issue for him.
Absolutely, and an important one for the community,
Sure.
for everybody, even if you're not often directly affected by that violence, which more plagues minority communities in Central Florida as it does in a lot of large cities. It's still an important issue, for everyone.
And we do see it too. I think we talk about Pine Hills. We talk about these really urban areas where there's a high level of poverty, and it seems to correlate in many cases with a high level of gun violence. But I just want to point out too that I've lost count of the number of times I've covered cases where children are shot in neighborhoods all over Central Florida because they find a parent's gun and it's not properly secured and locked up.
Right. Well, definitely gun violence is a...
So it does touch everyone.
It crosses all boundaries and socioeconomic groups as well. Even if it's more in one area, it's still a big issue.
Absolutely,
sure.
Absolutely. And so, Jessica, I want to turn back to you. Any questions out there for us, or other news in the Twitterverse that we should be aware of?
I'm refreshing our
yes, refresh. That's
our
the
results
motto
page.
of the night.
Yes, because it changes so quickly. You just really never know. Medical marijuana is still going really strong. 71% have voted yes so far. There's about 4,200 precincts of the 6,015 right now reporting. And solar is just still really tight, but it's not close enough to that 60% yes to pass that. I'm going to scroll down.
And probably not enough yet What would you say, Aubrey? Probably not enough yet to call it one way or the other.
For solar?
Yeah.
Based on the numbers that have come in with 8 million votes cast and at 50-50, and I don't think that there is a particular geographic area in the state that's going to be so much more for it, I'd say it's toast.
Okay.
That's just me. I mean, that's not an official call. That's just my personal feeling.
And I'd
based on the
agree with
numbers.
you based on what we're seeing there.
Right.
It doesn't look like they're going to get to 60%.
Yeah, I mean, they would have to have an enormous surge. And as I said, sometimes we do have issues in Florida. Well, even just the partisan races. Like for president, we know, for instance, Palm Beach, Broward, Miami-Dade, and Southeast Florida are going to vote a lot differently than, say, some panhandle counties.
Sure.
But this solar amendment, I don't think that there's really a big regional difference, so I don't think it matters which particular precincts are in and which are out. It doesn't look like it's going to make it. And I have to say, it doesn't disappoint me a bit. I would like to see Florida do more to make it easier to get solar in here. I don't totally paint the utilities as bad guys. I mean, I like being able to turn my lights on and
takes that for granted. But
and during the hurricanes, they get out there and they make things work. And so I don't mean to be too rough on them.
Sure.
And we can certainly try to take into account some of their problems that they might have had with the original amendment.
Absolutely.
But I'm glad that this one didn't pass, because it would have put some real roadblocks into the Constitution and made it very difficult to do something in the future.
It seems like solar policy and energy policy in general, in an environment where the technology in terms of solar cells, batteries, all of those things is changing so quickly, is that something we really want to put in the state constitution? So, that's putting a lock on something that we might
Right.
not
Well, especially if you're trying to make it more difficult in a state that presumably, the Sunshine State, most people, if you ask Floridians, they want to make it easier for solar. Sure. And so, that's what we want.
So, all right. So, okay.
Yes, yeah, that's what I was trying to wave you down over here.
Sure.
Medical marijuana has been approved in Florida. That's per the Associated Press, so that's new here. So, AP called it. We've got it up. That's,
All right, so that is a big victory for the people who are backing that amendment, particularly John Morgan, a trial attorney here in Central Florida. He put a lot of his own money into that amendment the last time around, and it failed. It came up a few points short, and this time it has succeeded. So there will be a much broader medical marijuana various types allowed here in Florida, and I imagine now what we're going to see is the wrangling over exactly what is allowed where.
Right, and I will say this, it's good news for John Morgan, good news for the 70% or so of people that wanted to see this. Point of information, I have a 24-year-old daughter who works in Northern California medical marijuana industry, so I'm quite familiar with how things go out there. I don't know exactly how soon things are going to take off in Florida, because here's why. The legislature has to do the enabling legislation. And as we've seen over the last 2 years, and this is one of the reasons John Morgan said I was just determined to get this back on the ballot again, they really have dragged their feet. And then actually, even when they finally did some small, the non-euphoric for kids with tremors and these kinds of things, it's been all tied up with lawsuits and because they were trying to limit it to only just a couple or a handful of places that could grow it and sell it. And so I will say this, it's the first step towards getting medical marijuana in Florida, and it's certainly a big step, because once it's in the Constitution, that's going to give it some heft. Sure. And it's going to put some pressure on the legislature to actually, hey, the Floridians want you to do this.
Yeah, you're not going to be able to walk into a dispensary tomorrow.
Correct, but it is going to, but we'll see. I'll just say it wouldn't surprise me if they still drag their feet a little.
Yeah.
But maybe not, because even when I saw them, we'll have to see what the exit polls show, but the pre-election polls showed that even the majority of Republicans in the state, not quite as high a percentage as Democrats, but even the majority of Republicans were supporting this. So that ought to maybe take a little of the pressure off some of those Republicans in the state House who were moving so slowly before, because now maybe they say, okay, well, I'm not going to get in trouble with my base voters if I push this.
And they should, of course, be keeping in mind what their voters want.
Correct. Well, yeah, they should keep in mind what all Floridians want, and it's in the Constitution, but we all know they're all also thinking about, who's going to vote for me, and I don't want to become, the next John Micah. I mean, that's a congressional race of somebody who maybe is in a very tight race and might get defeated. Incumbents don't lose very often. 90% of the time they get reelected, but they live in fear that they're going to be in the 10%, that they're going to go down. So in this case, because medical marijuana has passed so overwhelmingly, and because even Republicans, at least 50% or more, seem to have been voting for it, maybe my pessimism is misplaced. Maybe the legislature will move quickly on this. I don't think they will, quite frankly, but maybe they will.
I agree with you. I don't think there's going to be quick action on this, but I do think it's just irrefutable that attitudes have changed on this. And I say that as someone who in the past has been reluctant to support recreational marijuana, medical marijuana. I think one of the biggest knocks on this amendment is that it's the first step toward recreational, and a lot of people are not really ready to say they want to go there yet. Now, I'm not saying that won't happen down the road, but that has been one of the concerns.
I think so. It was certainly one of mine.
Yeah.
Being sort of a middle-aged dad of 4 kids and brought up in the Just Say No era of the Reagan administration, you know, I have to admit, again, I have an older daughter who works in the industry in California, and she has, you know, shaped my views on this over the last couple years, so that I do make a distinction.
Do this.
I do, and so I have made a distinction between, hey, you know, for people who think that this is like a natural remedy, you know, it's something that they can use for you know, treating stress, anxiety, or very pain relief, or real serious, more serious injuries, or I should say illnesses, cancer, AIDS, glaucoma, things like that. You know, so I have come around on it, but I will say, yeah, it may be this next step for total legalization. I don't know, but I think that's somewhere down the road for Florida. If at all, but we'll see.
And again, I think some of that will depend on what we see out of the legislature.
Yes.
So, all right, but definitely a good night for John Morgan tonight.
Absolutely.
So, all right, I want to turn back over here to Charles Minshew. Charles, tell us the latest.
Well, I was going to jump on about medical marijuana here. Interesting tidbit.
Yes.
The number of yes votes tonight for medical marijuana surpassed the total votes cast for medical marijuana in the entire referendum back in 2014. And about 6 million yes votes, 5.9 million votes total last time.
And I think that just says a lot about the difference in voter turnout between a mid-year and also a presidential race like what we're seeing tonight, especially one tonight, which has been so incredibly polarizing and has galvanized voters on both sides of the aisle to turn out.
And it's like I'm looking at different races. I'm looking at District 7. It is still very close.
Yeah.
Well, wait a minute. Okay. With 131 precincts reporting total, including almost all of Orange and 69 of the 80 in Seminole, it's still 52% Murphy, 48% Micah.
Right, and that lead may hold.
Okay.
There's not a lot of votes left outstanding in that race.
Wow, and that's a pretty big gap there for them. I mean,
yeah,
we're all sort of frantically trying to refresh our devices.
It's 11,000 votes right now, according to the state difference.
Okay. Oh, that's interesting. But several percentage points. So.
Yeah, it's about 2 percentage points. And when I look right now at the precincts reporting, in Seminole County, we have 97% of precincts are reporting, and we already have vote by mail and early voting is finished. So we've just got a few precincts outstanding. In Orange County, 99% of precincts are reporting. So. John Micah's got a lot of ground to make up.
He's got to hope for a miracle out of Seminole County in those last precincts for sure.
Yeah, and I want to refresh Seminole here because I'm checking OrlandoSentinel.com, but I'm also going straight to the source.
To the supervisor.
What's outstanding in the supervisor? We have Precinct 16 in Lake Mary, and we also have just east of Interstate 4 in Longwood are the only 2 precincts outstanding in Seminole County.
Wow.
And according to those results on the Seminole County site, we have John Micah ahead 113 to 102 in Seminole. And in Orange, let me pull that back up. I need somebody to grab a calculator while I'm looking this up here.
So while Charles is looking at that, Kayla, do I have you?
Organized on campus.
All right.
Yep, you got me. Can you hear me?
Democratic Party in Orlando. tell us what's going on.
Organize and march to stand up to say
Well, we're here.
Black Lives Matter and no longer.
The speeches have just started. As you can see in the background right here, Carlos Guillermo's talking. He was just let known that he's going to the House of Representatives in the state of Florida. So he's saying his thanks. And we're here. You can see how busy it is here. It's almost like a concert of sorts. We have national media. We have international media behind us. It's a totally different scene than the Republican Party in Altamont Springs. There are hundreds of people just trying to get through the door. And as you can see in the background, it's a party atmosphere. So it's very loud in here, but we'll be here all night.
We'll check back in with you shortly. That was reporter Kayla O'Brien. She was out at the Democratic Party in Orlando, and already a pretty excited energy in that room tonight. All right, so Charles, let's go back to you.
Yeah.
What you got for us on those numbers?
So in Seminole County right now, John Micah has a 10,000, almost an 11,000 vote lead in Seminole with 2 precincts outstanding. In Orange County, with 99% of precincts reporting, Murphy has a 21,000 vote lead in Orange. So that gives us, let's see, I'm doing math on the fly here tonight, guys.
That's all right. That's all right.
Sounds like about 10,000 vote lead, but that's my very
rough
rough
math.
math.
It is 10,425 vote lead.
For Murphy.
Yeah, for Murphy. In those 2 precincts, I'd have to go do the math on how many people live in that in those precincts.
Right. I don't know that there's.
I don't know if there's 10,000 people in that precinct.
In 2 precincts, that's usually not the case. You know, they're normally divided up by neighborhoods.
Yes.
So I'm not sure.
I'm not in any position to call a race, but
right. Yeah, we're not willing to call.
We're not willing
race,
to call that, but it's really close.
It is looking really close, and Stephanie Murphy may, in fact, unseat John Micah.
Yeah, and
that would be a huge upset here in Central Florida.
And I'm not sure, Aubrey, do you know how much money outside, DCCC has thrown into this race?
Well, I mean, what I read, and I haven't updated it in the last week, 10 days, but what I read was that the Democratic Party and outside groups backing Murphy had invested over $6 million. Wow. And that Micah was more, and the outside groups supporting him were more like 2 to 3 million.
Okay.
And probably even more importantly, the Murphy money was in early, and she was really blanketing the area with ads, direct mail pieces, and even expensive television ads, which, considering that the district is just Seminole County and just Orange. Part of Orange, then if you buy a television spot, I mean, you're going over 8-county area. Yes. That shows you've got some money to burn, quite frankly. Micah's money came in a little bit later and not nearly as much of it. So.
And what do you think this says about Florida? Because, clearly we're talking 2 different things here, U.S. Senate and 1 congressional district, which is not the whole state.
Right.
Of course, throughout the state, the whole state votes on Marco Rubio and Patrick Murphy. So we have a Republican winning the U.S. Senate race, and here in Central Florida, one of the biggest swing regions of a swing state, it looks like a Democrat might win. And again, we're still looking at the numbers, but that is possible.
It is, and
there's about 8,500 voters total in those 2 precincts.
Yeah,
so it's gonna be tight.
Yeah.
But we do have a projection from the AP on another amendment, by the way.
So solar amendment fails according to the Associated
All right.
Press.
All right.
So you were right on that. And so they're saying solar amendment fails. The amendment backed by the utility companies that a lot of folks claimed would have put some big obstacles in the way of solar energy on rooftops here in Central Florida has failed. It did not get the required 60%. So that's about, I think the last time I checked, it was around $22-23 million spent by the utilities on that.
Correct. A lot of, as I said earlier, a lot of the utility money, which theoretically was a lot of our money originally, as we all ratepayers.
If you're a Florida Power and Light or a Duke Energy
so
customer,
let's just make sure. Yeah, let's just make sure they don't go to the Public Utilities Commission and say we need a rate increase to pay for the amendment that we had to pay for.
Money back in our political ad funds.
Correct.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, interesting. And I assume the other two constitutional amendments passed overwhelmingly. The two that would give special tax breaks.
The tax exemptions.
Yeah.
Those,
they looked like they were way up.
They looked
over
like they were way up
70%.
when I last refreshed as well. And those were exemptions, I believe, for veterans.
Yeah, one was for veterans was I think 2 years ago, but this time it was for first responders. So if you were a permanently and totally disabled first responder, so EMT, firefighter, police officer, you were going to get a property tax break. And then the other one was for long-term resident seniors who were also poor, indigent.
Breaks to the state constitution.
Absolutely, you certainly could understand that. And of course, and I think Scott Maxwell, has written this in his columns. It's not that they're against, but keep in mind that if we give breaks to certain people, that means the rest are probably going to have to bear a little bit more of the burden in order to support in the policies and programs that need to be. So that, again, I don't say it's downside, but it's so people need to recognize when they vote for these things. The more tax we give to some people, that means the more burden that's left on the rest. I did vote for both of those and didn't even think twice because, hey, if somebody's permanently and totally disabled in line of duty, I don't think they pay any property taxes, but if we could help it. So
definitely not organized opposition to those two efforts, at least that I saw.
Right, and along the same veins, I was interested. I looked a little while ago at the Orange County supervised elections at the 3 charter amendments in Orange County.
Okay.
I think all of those were looked like they're all comfortably ahead on the yes, but I haven't checked recently, so I'd be interested to see.
And those were
how those are
controversial
doing.
As well. It's too bad we don't have Maxwell back up here.
Right.
He had
To some degree, I mean, in a sense, they've all passed before, but they were controversial because lawsuits brought, and basically one of the judges said some of the issues the plaintiffs brought forward. Maybe they have a point.
And there was a push on the constitutional officers, I believe.
Correct. And basically, this was going to make the officers in Orange County officially charter officers.
Okay.
But we're going to still treat them as if they were constitutional officers, except for by calling them charter offices, will allow us to make all changes like term limits, like nonpartisan elections. Which, if they're just technically constitutional officers, then the Florida Constitution would presumably see what you can and cannot do. So.
All 3 elections with 245 of the 247 precincts reporting. Question 1, 66% yes.
Okay.
Question 2, 69% yes. And question 3, 70% yes.
Okay. So yeah, once again, Orange County residents have rung in. They like the idea of term limits and nonpartisan elections for their county officers. That's supervisor of election, sheriff, clerk, prop appraiser, tax collector, et cetera.
Have you just District 5 at all? I mean,
Are we seeing?
We haven't.
Emily
talked about the
Bonilla,
local
57% of the vote. Ted Edwards, 43%.
Wow.
With 49 of 49 precincts reporting.
So that's a big ups for
It
Ted
is.
Edwards. He's currently the incumbent on the Orange County Commission, and it sounds like
And he's been around for a while.
He's been around for a while. He's served once before, and then was off mission for a bit. Now back on. Represent east part of Orange County.
He does.
And that has been quite an issue considering all of the development.
Yes, I was going to say it'll be interesting to see how that vote breaks down in his district. But what I'm going to bet is that the approval of 2 big developments out in East Orange County, and they're really just a few miles where I live in Sentinel County because I
Not
live
too far from the university.
Yeah, I live in Oviedo, but sort of on the far end of it, right near Chiliota. So you just go a few miles down the road, and you're right there on Lake Pickett.
Yeah,
And they do a.
Okay, so we have now called
the checkbox.
Called that election for Emily Bonilla. She has won a District 5 County Commission unseating Edwards, and I like you were just saying, I bet you those development issues played a big role in
Indeed, because it was controversial. It was a 4-3 vote. Ted Edwards wanted to allow the developments to move forward, and I can definitely tell you the vast majority of the people out in East Orange didn't want it. They absolutely did not want it. By thousands, they appeared at meetings. By the hundreds, they showed up at the county commission meetings, and they were really when the committee 4-3, and Edwards was, he voted to allow those developments to go forward, and so, it's sort of that you could say maybe one event or one vote might have cost the election, but in this case, it really might have.
Yeah, that issue was huge, and she spoke out on that quite a bit.
Indeed.
And she was touching on other issues, some not particularly relevant to the Joseph County Commission. I think one of her ads, as my colleague Maxwell wrote about, had to do with education.
Right.
There's not a lot that she can do on the county commission
Right.
on schools other than where schools are built and
Indeed.
developed.
And the other
So-
thing, is that, Edward's a Republican.
Yes.
And although typically in the local races, party affiliation is not such a big deal.
It's technically non-partisan.
That is, again, Orange County is very Democratic nowadays. So East Orange is somewhat more Republican than the rest of Orange. And so it might have played into it as well.
Sure.
Hard to say, but from some of the other elections that we just within Orange County, or the parts of the district that were in Orange County, like the Steve Murphy Micah race, or some of these other races, it seems Democrats are having a night in Orange County.
So far, it does appear that way, and these down ballot races, such as Emily Bonilla, probably benefit from being on the same ballot as a presidential candidate.
Indeed, it really does make a difference. As
Because people are going to come out.
Absolutely, as we were talking about with the medical marijuana amendment, coming 2 years ago, when Democrat turnout, overall turnout was down, but Democratic turnout was particularly depressed. Republican turnout was a little up, but this time around it seems like very, very even, and turnout, if it does record, it's going to at least pretty high.
Now, I just noticed up on the board here while we are talking about county commission, it looks to me like Brenda Carey will retain her seat on Seminole County Commission, and Brenda Carey's longtime commissioner there, very well known, widely respected, and it looks like that race being called for her.
I'll say it looks like we've surpassed 9 million votes in Florida this year, which is,
Wow.
in terms of raw numbers, is a record, even though the population has creeped up.
Sure.
Over
So maybe
time.
not as a percentage record, but
we
in
have,
raw numbers.
and 80% of the state is reported right now, with a 70% turnout. So 20% of precincts to go. It looks Polk County has not reported any precincts, so that's going to be.
What's going on over there?
So,
That's
also,
interesting.
I don't think we've seen it. I think Osceola hasn't.
Broward is at 45% of precincts reporting. There's a lot to come in there still, and we got a lot of small counties like Calhoun and Okaloosa. Glade counties reporting nothing at all.
How's presidential looking on?
Presidential race, according to the state right now, Trump is 4.4 million, Clinton 4.2 million.
Wow.
It's
Okay.
49-47 right now. We're around 49-48. I love this upshot projection that just goes back and forth. That, it could be.
Probably going to keep teetering like a seesaw,
They're
for
saying
the rest of the night.
I mean, this is the New York Times report. 76% Trump. It was 76% Clinton earlier.
Right. Well, this is one of those races where it really does matter which counties have voted and which have not.
Sure.
Because we seen, and I remember very, very back in 2000, where George W. Bush, seemed to be up. Well, Al Gore was up early, they called it for Gore, then they pulled it back, and then George W. Bush seemed to surge. But then there was some Miami-Dade and Broward County precinct reported, and the next thing you know, it was very close.
Pushes it up, sure.
And so, for Hillary Clinton and Democrats in the state, these numbers right now, they've got to really be hoping that, hey, let's hope that either Miami-Dade or Broward or Palm Beach, there's a lot of precincts that haven't reported, and that West Florida and some of the other, all across the northern tier, maybe they have reported.
Interesting.
But
Yeah.
I'm looking at Broward site. There's 278 of 577 precincts reporting. They have ballots cast at 7:06 right now, but I want to say that may not be all of them that they've. Because you go over here for a second. I'm gonna my update from this morning.
But it does sound like we still have 20% precincts
Yeah.
not reporting.
5% reporting according to the state election state for Broward County.
Okay.
So we have more
For
than half
Broward.
to go.
right, and so
Okay.
that's
But
potentially still good news. But
it shows Clinton up 473,000 to 211,000. So that's like a good chunk of that vote, especially than half of the vote. there.
right.
Okay.
But I figure if you double that, I mean, she's got a lead of a couple 100,000 there, then that would slide right back up into it. So
Yeah.
you have to still too close to call for that presidential race.
I jump back to District 7 really quickly. It's still one precinct outstanding.
Okay.
And it's Longwood in Sentinel County. let's
In the Micah Murphy.
in the Murphy race, yes.
All right. So, all right, we want everybody to know we're going to be on top of these numbers. And I want to thank all of our viewers for joining us tonight. We will be back. And all of our panelists, too, thank you so much, Aubrey, for joining us from the University of Florida. And thank you to Charles and Jessica as well. We will be back with more updates around 10:30. So stick with us and check back in. Thanks again.